who has not been in a class with me? Oh, this is so exciting. Oh, okay, great. All right. Well, then, let me think. I'm going to, out of great respect for those of you who are brand new to this, and out of understanding that those of you who have already done it will probably see some stuff that's new, or at least kind of refresh, I'm going to take this from the standpoint of nobody knowing anything about child abuse and medical stuff. How's that? Is that okay? And then what I would like for y'all to take away from this piece today is a better understanding of the way that we as medical providers think when we are trying to come to a best guess as to whether an injury got there on a child by accident or not by accident. Okay? Because that's really what the question is for people sort of in our fields, right? You don't necessarily have to tape this little statement I'm going to make, but I'm 51 and my jacket's going to be on and it's going to come off, and it's going to be on and it's going to come off, okay? So sorry, I apologize for that right now. Okay. Is there anybody here who has not worked a case that involves suspected physical abuse of children? Because we're going to talk about physical abuse today is kind of what we're going to be talking about. Okay. I thought that all I had to do was push this, but I was wrong. I'm going to skip a little bit. All right, this is going to be a question that I'm going to use to apply to the history as we're looking through pictures, because mostly what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you pictures and I'm going to tell you a story or a history, and we're going to decide as a group whether that story adequately explains that picture or not. We're going to try to decide whether we think it's true or not true, okay? And in medicine, when we use the word history, it means a little bit of a different thing than it does to y'all. In medicine, history means what we're told, okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, but it means whatever that child or that caregiver or the provider, you know, the person that's there tells us. That's the story that we're going to compare. And we're going to take the story and we're going to sort of organize our thoughts around 5 different questions about that story. Number 1 is, does the developmental age of the child, the way you do this is, does the blank match the history? And we're going to fill in 5 things. Does the developmental age match the history? For example, if we had a 4-month-old child who's at the emergency room because of a broken leg, and the history is that he walked off the front porch, okay? And y'all know a 4-month-old can't walk, right? So the developmental age doesn't match that history, okay? Second is going to be location. The history is that he fell on his head, but it's his leg that's broken, okay? Severity. Pattern or shape of the injury, and this is going to be particularly helpful when you're looking at bruises or burns where you might actually be able to see the shape of the thing that caused the injury, but then sometimes the pattern of fractures can give us a little bit of a clue about how they got there too. And then age of the injury itself. Y'all know as human beings who have bruised yourself, for instance, all of your lives you've been bruising yourself, so you sort of have a knowledge base of the fact that bruises change color over time, right? And actually, when you initially, the moment that you injure yourself, you don't have a bruise there at all, do you? You might have a red mark, but it might be supper time tonight before you start seeing it turn blue as that blood kind of seeps out where you can see it. And then over the next few days, it's going to change colors and it's going to go through a predictable order of color changes that has to do with the chemical breakdown of the dead blood that's in that bruise, okay? That blood, the blood cells die, the heme pigment starts getting broken down and by certain chemical processes, and that goes through color changes. And one of those color changes that it gets to is green, and another one's sort of yellow and then brown and fading away. And you can't look at the color of a bruise and tell exactly what time and what day that bruise happened, but you can tell generalities from the color. Like if you see a bruise that's already turned green, you know that didn't happen this morning in your parking lot, okay? And you know that from your own experience, right? The number I want you to try to just remember is a week, okay? If a bruise is green, then it's in the neighborhood of a week old. Now that could mean it's 5 days old, or it could mean it's 9 days old, but it's not 12 hours old. And if you just remember that one, that green is somewhere around a week, you know that blue is less than that, right? A nice blue or purple bruise is fresher than that. And if it's kind of already turned yellow and brown and stuff, it's older than that. Now the darker the person's skin is, the harder it's going to be to see the bruises. But if you can see, identify the bruise, and if you can tell what color it is, you can still use that same guideline, okay? All right, in general, the injuries that children have from abuse, when they have physical injuries from abuse, they cluster some as far as where on the body they are in age groups. And in very, very young children, in babies, that's where we see the most of our head injuries from abuse, like shaken baby syndrome, okay? Or like other kinds of non-accidental head trauma where maybe a baby slammed against a wall or something like that. You can see that in older children, but you see it mostly in kids under 1. Can you think why you might see it more in very young children? Because they're irritating, okay? Because their mama gets tired of them, right? They cry, they don't communicate real well, they're easy to pick up and slam or shake or whatever because they don't weigh much, they can't fight back. So a lot of factors figure into that. And like I said, it's not impossible. In fact, do you know that you can actually see shaken baby syndrome injuries in adults? They have actually been identified in prisoner of war situations in I think it's in the Palestinian-Israeli stuff. I can't remember which side it is that likes to shake their prisoners as part of the interrogation thing, but we actually see retinal hemorrhages and subdural bleeds from that. But it takes, it's big, big people doing the shaking, and it requires a tremendous amount of force and time to do that. Now, in most kids who are old enough to walk until they're big enough to really defend themselves, the most common location for abusive injuries on the body is the butt. Okay? The buttocks, the lower back, and the upper thighs. The area that we classically associate with what activity? Spanking, okay? Discipline. And a lot of physical abuse, you can tell looking at it that it may have started off as discipline but got carried too far. Okay? Or that may even be the history. You know, yeah, I beat her butt because she came in after curfew on Saturday night, but, you know, there is a point where it crosses the line. And where it crosses the line for medical people, where it crosses our line of needing to report it to be investigated, is if it leaves a bruise or leaves anything that we can still see by the time a child gets to us. That's when it needs to go to y'all, for y'all to decide whether in that community and that family with what was going on that day, whether it, you know, meets the standard of acceptable discipline or not. Okay? Every once in a while we'll see an injury on the sole of a child's foot. These are very rare. I've done about probably 4,000 evaluations for abuse in my career, as well as been just a regular pediatrician in a lot of settings, and, you know, seen children for lots of reasons. And I've only seen these injuries either 4 or 5 times, sole of the foot injuries. But they're real important for y'all to know about, because if you ever have a case where, say, in the medical records it says that he had some kind of injury on his foot, you need to ask about that and really question about how that got there, because if it got there on purpose, the perpetrator that injures children's feet is different than the perpetrator that picks up a belt and gets mad, you know, and over-disciplines a child. The dynamic is different. If somebody is, you know, beats a child with a belt, usually what happens is they get really mad right at that moment about something, they grab up that belt and they do it, and then it's over with. But sole of the foot injuries are different. These are usually burns, and if you think about it, somebody had to first get mad, then they had to stop and go find something hot, okay? Maybe even wait for it to get hot. Then they had to go get the child and say, come on, we're going to sit down here on the sofa and I'm going to burn your feet. And then they had to take the socks and the shoes off of that child, and then they had to inflict the injury, usually on both feet, and then they cover the feet back up. Why do you think they pick the foot when they do this? Because it's hidden. Nobody else sees the sole of your child's foot but you. Okay? Even kids that are in daycare all day long, you know, they're walking around on their feet. The daycare doesn't undress their feet and look at them to see if there's anything wrong. You know, it's a hidden place. So these people know before they start that they need to pick a place that's hidden because they know what they're about to do is wrong. Okay? There's a torture quality to doing this. And if you think about it too, all those steps they had to go through, thinking through it and doing it, that's time. That's time a normal person would cool off. Okay? These people are dangerous, and if you see a sole of the foot injury on a child that could be from abuse, that child is at much higher risk of dying at the hands of that person that did it, okay? In my career, all of the injuries I've ever seen that were on purpose on the sole of the foot also had at least one abusive broken bone, and every single one of them ended up TPR, termination of parental rights. Once the whole thing got looked into, it was clear that it was just too dangerous for that child ever to be with that family again. So, you know, they were TPR'd and adopted. So let that get your attention if you're looking through medical records, or say you've just gotten a new child, okay, and the child's limping. Look at the foot. And if there's something on the bottom of that foot, somebody needs to pay attention to that. Now, doctors aren't going to understand the importance of it. If a child goes into the doctor for something and the mama says, oh, he stepped on a cigarette or stepped on a wasp or something like that, the doctor's going to buy that story because these are rare. They're very rare, okay? But if you see it in a medical record, question it. Look at it skeptically. In a person old enough to fight back, the most common location for abuse is not going to be the buttocks because, you know, a 13-year-old's not going to just stand there and let her butt be beaten, okay? It's going to be more upper body, where you see injuries from defending yourself in a fight that you're having with somebody about the same size as you. So forearms, maybe some more upper body kinds of injuries, more common in older kids, like big middle schoolers and above. Okay? The things people hurt children with also cluster some in age groups. And the vast majority of our burn injuries, heat injuries, are in young children, preschoolers, infants, and toddlers. And it's in elementary school age children, like kindergarten, elementary, that we see the physical abuse from the implements that we associate with discipline. Hands, belts, fly swatters, switches, things like that become the most common weapon that we see in that sort of smaller child age group. In somebody big enough to fight back, the most common weapon is just the other person. Fists, teeth, feet, you know, from having an altercation kind of setting. Okay. Just as a little warm-up exercise, can y'all see these pictures okay with the lights on? Is it okay? Good. How many times has this child been hit? With what, do you think? Looks kind of like he's been stepped on because you see oval sort of shapes. Okay, what else could it look like?
Somebody said electrical cord back here.
Electrical cord. All right, this is a typical electrical cord injury. When I was growing up, switches got used a lot to spank children, but these days people don't have as easy access to switches because they don't spend time outside, okay? And electrical cords are the things we see the most now. Even more than belts, we see electrical cord injuries. They're available in everybody's house, in every room. They make the same nice sting that a switch makes. Ow. And when it crosses the line, as if somebody hits hard enough to leave a bruise or cut the skin or leave a scar or whatever. Does this look fresh or old to you? Can you get any sort of sense of how old this is? Okay. I can see standing up closer to it that it's red. It's very red. So this is, if there's still red in a bruise, it's less than 24 hours old. Okay. Red is just inflammation. It's sort of the body's outrage that a bruise is coming and that they got hit. 2-year-old goes to a new in-home daycare today for the first day, and mama gets ready to leave her and she starts crying, and the daycare operator, you know, says, don't worry, they all cry the first day, she'll be fine, go on to work. So the mama went to work and called back a few times during the day to check on the baby, and she was fine all day. The 2-year-old, I shouldn't say baby. At the end of the day, she went and picked her child up, went home, and started running a bath to get ready for, you know, nighttime stuff, and went and heated some soup on the stove, came back and the water was ready, so she turned off the water, took the child's clothes off, stood the child in the bathtub, and then took her diaper off, okay? And that's when she saw these injuries. She went to the phone and called the daycare operator and said, "What happened to my child's bottom?" And the daycare operator said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. She fell on the playground today." Oh, she fell on the sliding board today. Okay? So, we're going to take that history and these injuries and start practicing those questions, okay? All right. Number 1, developmental age of the child. Does a 2-year-old play on the sliding board? Okay. All right. And some are better at it than others, but they could because they can walk, they can climb, they can sit, they can do the things that are required for a sliding board, right? Location. If you injure yourself on a sliding board, what parts of the body do you think could be injured? Any way you can think about the slide. How would the knees get injured?
When they hit the ground.
If they hit the ground, okay, good. Elbows, how?
When they slide down, they slide.
If they're sliding and kind of put like a braid it, okay. Or if the elbow hits the ground, would be another way. Hands, how? Holding on and getting sort of almost like a road burn kind of thing. Or again, if the hands hit the ground, all right? Nobody said bottom yet. How would you injure your bottom on a slide?
Yeah, I'm gonna be sliding down and naked.
You'd have to be naked, right? Okay. Would a 2-year-old get naked on a playground? Yeah, they do. 2-year-olds love to be naked, okay? They love to be naked, but they probably wouldn't be left on the playground like that for very long. So let's since the 2-year-old can get naked, let's make him naked, okay? Let's make him naked and put him on the slide board. How's he going to hurt his bottom?
Slide down. Because it's gonna stick.
If it sticks and slides, okay.
Or if it's hot.
Or if it's hot, if it's like a metal, you know, the old metal slides that get really hot.
Plastics.
If they hit the ground and their butt hits really hard, that might bruise. All right, those are great concepts. Now, let's look at them and sort of pick them apart, okay? All the ones about hurting your knees and elbows and hitting your butt on the ground. What might protect you actually from getting bruised if those parts hit the ground?
Your clothes.
Your clothes on your buttocks, right? It's sand. Isn't the bottom of a slide usually sand? Why do you think they put sand at the bottom of slides? So you won't get bruised when you hit the ground at the bottom of the slide, okay? That's sort of the whole point of why they picked that material. Can you think of any, maybe she was wrong about the slide. Maybe it's some other piece of playground equipment. She just spoke wrong. So let's just think a little bit wider on the playground. Is there anything on the playground you can think of that might make injuries like this? Swing, okay, because the swing might have edges in it, and she might have her bottom in contact with it. All right, severity. From any way you can think of having to do with the sliding board, the swing, or anything else, do you expect this much injury? Okay, pattern or shape. Can you see any kind of pattern or any kind of shape? Describe the shapes that you see in there. Okay, and it looks like handprints because you see kind of lines in it. Is that what you're thinking? Okay, anything about a slide going to make lines?
Is the skin broken in this part?
It is not broken. It's not broken. You can't tell that on the picture, but it's not. We're sort of, I'm kind of really organized and we're sort of in the bruise part, even though I didn't have a title slide. Just trust me. Oh, okay. So maybe it's not even bruises. Maybe it's like a bad diaper rash or something. Okay. Well, let me just tell you for the purpose of this is bruises for what we're doing today, okay? All right, age of the injury, does it look fresh or old to you? All right, it looks fresh, so you know it probably happened today or sometime real recently. Are we going to report this? If this came to a doctor, would you want us to report this? Okay. All right, so the child is actually interviewed. She's like almost 3, and she has very good vocabulary. And somebody asks her, "What happened to your bottom?" And she says, that lady at the daycare, she spanked me, and she demonstrates like this. Now that may mean that she got spanked a lot of times, or it might just mean that she got spanked and it hurt a lot. It's got something to do with a lot, but a 2-year-old doesn't know anything about numbers, okay? And, she said, and she got a switch and hit me. That's the first time the mama ever knew this child knew the word switch, because she'd never used a switch at her house. Does that combination of explanations sound like it would fit what you're seeing here?
Seems like more though. See, but those little those marks on the side over there could be for the spitch.
Okay, why do you think the child was being disciplined? Because she was crying, and you don't cry in this daycare. Very good. Okay, good job. 4-year-old fell down the stairs. Can a 4-year-old fall down the stairs? Developmental age. Number 2, location. If you fall downstairs, where are you going to get hurt?
Probably on your chest or something.
Okay. Think about where you get hurt when you fall. Where do you usually get hurt when you fall? You get hurt on your bony parts that stick out, right? Your bony prominent parts. You get hurt on your elbows, your shins, your knees, your chin. Those are the parts that hit first, and they bruise easier than padded soft parts because there's bone under them. Okay? So if they hit a hard surface, then that skin is kind of crushed between the bone on the inside and the hard surface on the outside. But if there's a lot of fat in between, then it acts like a cushion and it's harder to bruise. So you can get accidental bruises on soft parts, but it's harder to do. And in all children, we expect to see some bruises. All children, right? Well, no. All children over 1. All children old enough to walk. If I'm a pediatrician and I'm seeing a child for a well checkup, I want to see some bruises on that child, because if he doesn't have any bruises, somebody's not letting him move around in space, okay? But where I really want to see those bruises is on the bony prominent parts, and I especially want to see them on the shins. That's a good comparison place to look. So if you're seeing a child with bruises and the mama says, oh, by the way, he bruises real easily, or oh, by the way, he's very clumsy and falls all the time, well, he might have more bruises than somebody else, but he better have a whole lot more on his shins. And if you look there and there's maybe just one little bruise on the shin, but a whole bunch on the buttocks, then this isn't from bruising easy. And it's not from being clumsy, okay? Because this is where we're going to see a lot of those injuries. Better than any blood test we could do is to compare those spots. All right, I got off track. Location. Bony prominent parts is where we'd really want to see bruises, but falling down the stairs, though, that's a big, tall fall. Maybe he could hit something besides just his elbow or his knee, right? What else could he hit? He could hit his butt. Would you expect him to hit it over and over and over again going down the stairs? All right, he might hit the first time he hits, but only in a real particular situation will you see a child actually fall down hard enough to bruise on a step and then another step and then another, and that's in an icy condition. Like if it's a child in Wisconsin that runs out of the house with no diaper on, okay, and slips, and there's speed involved, and he's going to hit hard because he's not slowing down on that ice. Yeah?
One thing about the bruising and story falling down the stairs, you got a stable, solid object, and those bruises are wrapped.
Okay, you've got a stable, solid object at the edge of a stair, and these bruises are wrapped. So let's talk about location and the pattern or shape, okay? Do you see any pattern or any shape in this? What kind of shape do you see?
Like a cave. Like a stick.
It's got a uniform
It look like a hand.
pattern that's the same thing intentionally.
Let's take some of them. Let's take these. Let's sort of separate it out. See these right here? They look kind of like rectangles to me.
Look like a stick or something.
What kind of things could make rectangles? Sticks might. What else might? A belt might. All right, a stick and a belt, or a ruler. How about a ruler?
Yeah.
All right, let's stop right there. A belt and a ruler have the same shape, correct? They're going to leave a different kind of bruise because the belt is flexible and the ruler is rigid. So the belt can curve with the body where the ruler can't, okay? You can look at this child's back and see evidence of whether this thing was able to wrap or not wrap. Did it wrap or didn't it? It did, okay? It's kind of going around the side of his thighs there. If you look across the middle, if you feel on your own back, you have a valley where your spine is. And if this thing were rigid like a ruler or the edge of a stair, you'd want to see it bruise over here, but miss in the middle. But this fills all in, doesn't it? So this is something flexible. This is not a stair. Okay? And we can't really tell about the color because that whole picture is sort of purple looking, so I'm not going to ask you whether you think it's fresh or old. But what weapon do you think this is? Okay, it's a belt. Now, how would you explain this thing that's not rectangles, though?
Should be an iron, or should have. But it's.
I don't know, like somebody's feet.
Okay, and kids can be injured with two different things or in two different ways, but I tell you what, usually it's pretty simple. Usually there's one thing that makes the injuries, and that's just the belt where he got hit so many times in the same spot that it all sort of bled together, okay, into one big bruise. All right, good job. 1-month-old comes into the doctor's office because he's fussy and his mother is worried that he might have his first ear infection. The doctor looks in his ears and they're fine, listens to his chest, turns him over to listen to his lungs and sees these injuries. Can y'all see these? Can we just real briefly turn the lights off just for a second and then we'll turn them back on? Turn these off too. Everything. Can you see this, 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 kind of all around? Okay, turn the lights back on. The doctor says to the mother, the only appropriate thing ever to say if you are the first person to notice a suspicious injury on a child. Okay, this is real important for people like that do home visits or for teachers in a classroom or whatever. If you're the first person to notice an injury that makes you say, whoa, wait a minute, the only appropriate thing to say for the first question is, what is this? Let the child or the mama or whoever label it for you. Okay? They might not even label it a bruise, but let them go on record as saying what it is. And then you can ask, well, how did it get there? Okay? The doctor says, what is this? And the mama says, gee, I don't know. I didn't see it until now. And the doctor says, really? Well, it's kind of weird. What do you think it might be? And the mom said, well, it looks like bruises to me. And the doctor said, oh, well, now that you say that, it looks kind of like bruises to me too, because it's fine to play dumb, okay? For some of us, that's a whole lot easier than others. How do you think it might have gotten there, he said. And the mama said, well, I'll bet I know. I'll bet I know how it got there. Okay, my husband Steve, he's a long-distance trucker, okay? And he's been gone on a 2-week run, and he just got back last night. And he got back last night, and he came in, and he said, Marjorie, you know I didn't have anything to do with the baby before I left. And I know we had that little argument about whether he's even my baby or not, but I decided while I was out on my run, because my radio wasn't working and I just had to think the whole time, that regardless of whether this baby's mine or not, he deserves to have a father that treats him right. So last night, my husband, he said, Marjorie, I want you to teach me everything there is to know about taking care of this baby because I want to be involved in his life. I want to take him to t-ball games. I want to help him pick out his tux for the prom. I want to learn tonight how to feed this baby, bathe this baby, rock this baby to sleep. So last night I taught him everything. I showed him how to heat up the baby's bottle. I taught him a little lullaby that my mama used to sing to me. And he never did quite get the words right, but he tried. And I don't know, I'm thinking looking at the baby that maybe Steve burped him too hard. Okay. Developmental age of the child. Does a 1-month-old get burped? Okay. Interestingly, they don't in Greenville County, but I don't know what that's about. Okay. Location, if you're going to get bruised from burping, where is it going to be? On your back. Severity, do you expect this much bruising from burping? How much do you expect?
No.
Why?
Because you don't just happen.
Because it's a really gentle activity, isn't it? Okay? But this is a trucker who's big and he's never burped a baby before. Maybe he burped him. Maybe he didn't know his own strength. What do you think?
Them old bruises.
They're old? How old are they?
They're green.
They're green. So how old are y'all going to tell me they are? A week. If he got home last night, is he the person that bruised this baby? No. Okay. Gets reported and investigated, and it turns out it can actually very quickly be corroborated that he's been gone for 2 weeks, okay? Ever since the baby was 2 weeks old, he's been gone. The mom is 16. She's left alone in a trailer in the middle of a cleared out old soybean field. She can't see her nearest neighbor. They actually just moved to that community right before the baby was born, and the only people she's met there are the nurses that took care of her in the hospital. She hasn't even been to the grocery store. The husband did all the grocery shopping. The baby, 5 or 6 days ago, wouldn't stop crying, okay? And so the mom hit the baby. Now, she actually admitted to that very quickly. What would we worry about in a child this old that's been hit enough to be bruised? We'd worry about if other times that it happened, worry about shaken baby, okay, because that's common with these, crying small babies. So this baby would need to go to the hospital and be evaluated for all that kind of stuff. But this was a great case because the DSS folks investigating it decided that there might be some potential for this mother because she really just didn't have a lot of resources. And they were very creative, and the child was EPC'd, of course, but and this was in the old days when you used to have 60 days to make a decision. But at 60 days, they actually returned the child with very close supervision, with a family aide, with having hooked the family up with a church that agreed to sort of adopt them, with having hooked them up with a foster grandmother who would be a resource to the mother and who would talk to her at least once every day. And if the mom needed to know how to handle a rash and she couldn't get the doctor, or she wanted, or she was getting frustrated with the child and didn't know what to do, she could call on this foster grandmother. So with a whole lot of support in place, the baby was actually returned successfully and never had another involvement with DSS. They kept the case open for like a year and a half, a long, long, long time. But after they got out, never had another report. For the rest of the child's like 20 now, 18 or 20 years old. So it's a pretty cool outcome. All right. 8-year-old moderately retarded child comes to the emergency room with a fever and a cough, and his mother is worried that he might have pneumonia. So the physician pulls his gown aside to listen to his lungs, sees these injuries, and says, what? What is this? The mama says, gee, I don't know. I didn't see it until now. The doctor says, what do you think it might be? And she says, I bet I know. I bet I know. He's been helping me out a whole lot lately, and he's been after me for 2 years to get him a cat. And last week was his birthday. So I said, okay, if you will take care of the cat and feed the cat and bathe the cat and put flea powder on the cat and you take care of everything to do with the cat, I'll let you get a cat. And he promised me he would. So I took him down to the pound and we picked out a baby kitten. And now that I'm seeing this, I'm thinking maybe that kitten scratched him because he's the only one that takes care of the kitten. All right, so one of the questions is, when did you come back from Kenya, okay? Because this is one big mother cat, right? This grab and hold way back here and still holding on around there. Who in this room today has cat scratch injuries on your body right now? Oh, come on, at least 6 of you do. All right, I don't want you to show them to me. I just want to know where they are. What body part are they on? Why are they on your hands?
Trying to get away from you.
Because you might be restraining the cat or something like that. But have you ever not been restraining the cat? Have you ever been an innocent victim of a cat where you're just sitting over here on one side of the room turning the pages on a book or writing or something like that, and you see your cat over there enter the room and hunch down, okay? And then you see those ears kind of lay down, and you see the tail start to twitch, and he's like working his little butt. What's he going to do? On what part? Why? Because they're moving, okay? Because they're moving. Cats, by nature, are vile, predatory creatures who spend their entire waking lives lying around planning how they're going to kill or torture the next moving thing that crosses their line of vision, okay? Cats do not play, they practice for the big kill. Cats are not interested in the parts of you that don't move. Okay? No self-respecting cat's going to ever waste a minute of his time on some part of you that doesn't move. But we would rather this not be child abuse, so we're going to say, okay, maybe it was a slow day for this cat. Okay? He needed something to do. I still want to see 40 times this many injuries on the parts that are interesting to a cat. So we're going to look there, we're going to look at the feet, we're going to look around the face, because cat will go for your face, okay? If he can get to it. Those parts are completely clear. All right, that's location, severity. We kind of talked about severity here. That's pattern or shape. Those of you who have cat scratches and won't acknowledge it today, the cat scratches that you have, what do they look like? They're fine, aren't they? Because it's sharp. They're like razors. Some of them could be quite deep, but they're short. They're part of an arc. Occasionally, you might get one long one if the cat surprises you and you jump up and it kind of drags. But they're often 2 or 3 together. They're clustered, okay? But they're not like this, are they? Is this fresh or old? Is there anything on it that looks like? Oh, you know what? I apologize. This is not big enough for y'all to tell this. Let me just tell you that everything on this child is dark lines, like when you've gotten a mosquito bite and you've scratched it and it got infected last summer and it goes away and leaves a black spot, okay? All of this is like that except for a couple of spots that are shiny because some scab has just fallen off, okay? So the vast majority of this you can clearly say is not something that happened last week. What do you think it is? First of all, would you want this to be reported? The doctor bought the story, treated the child for a cold, and sent him home. 3 days later, his cold was no better, and he came back to the same emergency room. Another doctor opened his gown, said, "What is this?" Mama gave the same story, and this doctor didn't believe it and made a report. Okay? So, what is it? Switches. Good. Now, here's the backstory. It got reported and investigated, and it turns out that this 8-year-old, okay, y'all are aware that in South Carolina when you're 5, you're required to be in some sort of an educational setting, right? This child is 8. If you're developmentally delayed or retarded, do you have access to public services earlier than 5? Yes. What services can you get? BabyNet, public school services even, like for therapy and stuff. He's never been enrolled in a school anywhere in the United States, okay? Because his mama needs for him to be home to babysit the 4-year-old, the 2-year-old, and the 9-month-old.
Oh my God.
Okay, so here we go. This is just tip of the iceberg. Clear educational neglect. You could make a case for emotional neglect because this 8-year-old has actually been forced into a parenting role of these other 3 children and has never played with other 8-year-olds in his life. He's never been able to just be an 8-year-old. And he's, very neglected as far as his cognitive development and so on. All right. All right, just to recap, accidental injuries, you want to see those on bony prominent parts. If it's supposed to have happened all at one time, you want to see them all be in one area or on one side of the body. If somebody trips and lands on a rock and gets bruised, he's not going to bruise here and then the bruise pop out on another whole side of his body, okay? So think about that, body planes. And then inflicted injuries are going to tend to be more on the central part of the body, the trunk, the thighs, the buttocks, and so on, and the softer part. Okay, why you say that's iron? Okay, because it is an iron. And let me tell you, from my experience being a pediatrician and being a field trip mama and being everything I've ever been in my life, iron burns on children are very, 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 very common. In my population where I've lived, which is only South Carolina, in my experience, 15% of children don't make it through their childhood without getting burned by an iron, okay? Most of the time it's accidental. What do you think most of the time is the story?
Fell off the board.
Fell off the board on them, or they ran into it or something like that, okay? How many times do you think a child's going to do that?
Oh,
One, okay? They'll do it one time and then they're not going to do it again. So if we're seeing 2 burns like this, then that's not making sense, okay? Now, I will tell you this. There is a subspecies of human called teenagers, all right, that don't follow these rules of logic. And a teenager will burn himself or herself more than once, but normal smart children will only do it once, okay? So if we see 2 iron burns, we're going to be worried about that. The most common location for the accidental ones is on the arm. It's the leading part when they pull it or run into it or whatever. The second most common location, believe it or not, is the thigh. And it's when they sit down and they're playing iron. And they'll hit, you know, do like that and hit themselves. How many times? 1 time, okay? Most of the iron burns you see are just the edge of the iron. You're going to see a straight line. But if you get part of the bottom of the iron, you may see some other shape like this, you know, piece of a triangle here. And this triangle doesn't mean it's the tip of the iron, because any part of the bottom of the iron, once you kind of press the skin out, it becomes in the shape of a triangle. Okay? All right, go. Oh, I'm running the slides, aren't I? Sorry. Okay. Can somebody just let me know what time it is? 10 till. Okay. All right, what do you think this is? It's an iron. What are the little circles, though? Okay, those are the steam holes, the steam vents, and that's not burned, right? It's identical to this skin. It's not burned, which... what all that means is there was no steam coming out when he got burned, okay? Either there was no water in it or the button that says up for steam was down, okay? Why?
Because you see the little holes in it.
That's not the one that was just placed, I mean,
Because
just
that
accidental.
was held in place for a while.
You think?
It's severe, you know, it's a bad burn.
Y'all are evil thinking people. Well, let me tell you the history. 4-year-old comes in for an EPSDT visit to get his shots to start 4-year-old kindergarten, okay? It's September. He's got on a short sleeve shirt and shorts because it's September and it's South Carolina and it's hot, all right? The nurse gets the chart and takes him back to weigh him and stuff and immediately sees this injury right here and says, what is this? And the mama says, oh, he burned himself on the iron. He ran into the iron, and I had some salve at home from back when I spilled bacon grease on myself, and so I just used it and it healed up fine, so he didn't need to go to the doctor. And the nurse said, oh.
It doesn't heal some of it. It was a bad little nasty little burn.
But it's on the arm and it's running into the iron. And I just told you it's very common to get a single iron burn on your arm from running into the iron.
It's not going to be like that right now. It's too severe.
Well, the nurse was about as evil thinking as y'all are, okay? So, she was getting ready to go, you know, to go ahead and get him weighed and measured and everything and then go tell the doctor that you've got a case you need to report in room 4. But the mom spared her a little bit of trouble. The mom came out of the room just as she was about to close the door on him and said, do you have a bathroom I could use real quick? And the nurse said, sure. And she directed the mom to the bathroom, which the nearest one she could think of at that moment was out the door, across to the main hospital building, and down a hall, and 5 minutes away. So that gave her some time with the child. So she goes back in, and she says, Tommy, see this gray hair right here in my hair? I'm kind of old, and I get in trouble if I don't write down what I'm supposed to write down, and I forgot to write down what happened to your arm. And Tommy said, remember my mama said I ran into the iron? And she said, oh yeah, I remember what your mama said, but I got to write down what really happened, and I forgot what really happened. And Tommy said, remember, I spilt the something, I don't remember what it was, and my mama was mad and she tried to burn my face, and I successfully defended my face against my mama. Okay? Now, actually, he ended up getting burned twice, and we already know if we see 2 of them, we're going to report it, right? Or we're not going to believe the story. And he actually has another burn. But this burn all by itself would be worrisome because, first of all, when you run into an iron, it's the hairy side of your arm that tends to hit. Okay? That's your lead point usually. If you're just running through a room or pulling something down, that's what's up. Okay? That's where you're going to see most of your accidental burns is on that part. On this light part, that's often associated with defense. Okay? And the circles, if this child were in motion and brushed against the iron or ran into the iron, those circles, I want them to be blurry. I don't want them to look quite this sharp. So this does imply that that iron is on there for at least, you know, a piece of a second, but not in motion. So either way, I think y'all are definitely right to not believe this story. Okay? There's the other burn. Is there any possible way in the same moment to get that burn and this burn?
If water was in it.
Oh, because it could be spilled water from it? Oh, okay. Well, that's a good thought. But if it's not, if it's part of the actual iron, there's no way to do that at once because you've got your flat iron here and your thumb's in the way. And if you turn this to try to get that burn, this is in a different spot now. So it's 2 separate burns. Got it? 9-month-old comes in on November the 1st of 1990, the first day that it had been cold last night, okay, right after Halloween. And Mama and Aunt run into the emergency room with the child, crying, out of breath from running. They live behind the hospital. Ran in. Took a minute to get it together where they could even tell what it was that happened, okay? The story is that they're in the kitchen cooking, talking to one another, okay? The 9-month-old is on the floor, and they've given him some toys to play with. They get to talking. The next thing they know, they hear a blood-curdling scream coming from the hall. And they look down, and the baby's not there anymore, and the baby's in the hall. On the heater grid in the floor, like this, screaming, okay? So they run in and pick the baby up and saw that she's burned, and they run her to the emergency room. While she's in the emergency room, when she first gets there, she's got red burns that aren't blistered. By the time she gets through, because the emergency room visit is not a 10-minute commitment, right? You're there for hours. By the time she gets through, it makes blisters that we can take pictures of, okay? Developmental age of the child. What does a 9-month-old do? Crawl. Location, if you were to get burned the way that they say, would it be your hands that are burnt? Pattern or shape, oh, severity. Do those things get hot enough, though, to burn?
No, I don't know. I don't like them. I don't step on them.
You don't step on them?
I don't like them. Not in the
Talking about like in houses that were built in the 1940s with the in the middle of the hallway, and that used to be like forced air, oil heat or something like that, furnaces. All right, if you don't know that these things get that hot, then you're definitely going to suspect this, right? But I'm telling you they do. Most of you actually knew that. But a lot of people don't know that. If you've never been around these things, you might not know that. But they do get hot enough to burn. Pattern or shape. Does it look like a grid pattern? Age of the injury. Is it fresh or old? Did they seek care in a timely manner? Yes, they did. All right. Would you want us to report this?
A 9-month-old.
Okay, for what? Why? For failure to protect? Okay. Now, suppose this mama said, I had no idea these things get that hot.
Well, you had an idea that your baby could crawl.
But I've never seen her crawl before. She's just 9 months old, and this is the first time we've ever seen her crawl.
You got to know that thing.
Once you got 9 months old, you
Common
get more
sense.
attention on that child.
But I had her right there in the kitchen with me while I was cooking. I mean, I couldn't have been more attentive. I had her right there. I put toys right down there on the floor with her, and I had my sister in there with me. And I know, but I can't help blinking.
I mean, that's part of taking care of a baby. You got to know.
Okay, well, that's a judgment call. In this particular case, are we worried that somebody did it on purpose?
He could be, yeah.
Okay, we're not really worried about that now. It could be, but there's a lot that really fits. In this particular case, it was able to be quickly documented through that child's medical records that the family had actually just moved to this house in the last month and used to live in a different kind of housing that didn't have these floor furnaces. So it's possible that the mom wouldn't know that they get that hot, okay? And actually, she had a well baby visit 2 weeks ago, wasn't crawling yet. Okay? Ooh, okay, so now it's a little muddier, isn't it? All right, so now maybe it's not like gross neglect, and we're really kind of shying away from abuse, right? Okay, so you're going to take into account all of those different factors. All right, I think we're at 5 minutes. It's 1 o'clock now. Questions? I know they told y'all it was 2 hours. That's so you could have a built-in lunch time after you got finished here. Okay? Wasn't that nice? Yeah.
Dr. Luberoff, we want to thank you so very much. A small token for our appreciation
for you. That's so sweet. Thank you. That's
and
the
a copy
best.
for you.
Thank you. Wow, that's great.
Everyone. Is there a way we can get in contact
Yes,
with you?
yes. I neglected to tell you this. By sitting through this 1 hour of training, you now know more than most doctors you will come across about telling the difference between abusive injuries and non-abusive injuries. So I want you to trust that you can think through things, okay? And I want you to feel free to question if you think your answers come differently than somebody else's, okay? And you can reach me through the Richland Hospital operator at 434-7000 or at the ARC at 898-1470. And one or the other of those people can always figure out where I am. And you're welcome, welcome, welcome to call me to help you brainstorm through something that you're thinking through, or if you want me to look at pictures of a case, or if you want to bring a child for me to see, I'm happy to help you within, at any stage that you need me to help you think through the medical part of something, okay? Yes? 434-7000 is just the main hospital operator, because I'm not actually at the hospital. I'm over at the ARC, but the hospital operator knows me. She knows how to find me. Okay? Thank y'all.